nighttime. The napalm held off the enemy attacks. The officers and George Forrest's company were safe inside their perimeters. The North Vietnamese came back for the others.
So they tried to come in and kill us. They were walking around killing the wounded.
And you knew that?
We knew that.
And we knew that.
And then you could hear it.
Yeah.
Right? And we could hear it. Right next to us, they'd come up and they'd go, oh, blah, 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 in Vietnamese, and then you'd hear, no, no, and kapow. And then, ha, 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 and then the next one. Yeah, right?
And so the urgency for us was we needed to get out there and at least get to these guys to provide some kind of protection. We didn't know how many, and that was one of the problems.
Soldiers from George Forrest's company did manage to rescue some of the men trapped in the long grass. And the others?
We found men in the morning who'd been tied up and shot. A couple of them had been tied to trees and shot. They systematically killed our wounded. The next day, we shot their wounded, too. We weren't very happy. And I said, don't shoot, don't shoot. And they said over the radio, we're killing North Vietnamese wounded. And I said, don't kill the wounded, please. Don't kill the wounded. And they said, nah, we're going to kill them anyway. People were angry. People were really angry.
And if anybody has never walked a battlefield with 200-300 torn, bloating American and North Vietnamese bodies, then they shouldn't feel qualified to talk about the glory of war, because there is none.
And it was just horrible. It's the most awful thing I've ever seen in my life, and I'll never forget it. And this certainly brings it back. About 150 men died right in these woods right here. And a lot of them were my friends, real good friends. I'm so sad they're dead. I'm so sad they're dead.
In the end, more than half the battalion at Landing Zone Albany were casualties. 121 wounded, 155 dead. It was a devastating loss. And for military commanders, it presented a very real public relations problem. What the U.S. Army did next would help pull an unsuspecting nation further into war.
In a moment, the aftermath.
The Battle of the Drang Valley made no sense to U.S. military leaders. How could the greatest fighting force in the world win an overwhelming victory one day, only to be crushed the next day? The Army never really found the answer to that question, and the American people were told a lie. Look at this Army newsreel put out after the battle.
A fierce firefight resulted. It was, in the end, another disaster for the enemy. The enemy losses in dead and wounded were tremendous.
To this day, the Army does not even acknowledge there ever was an ambush at Landing Zone Albany.
The American victory proved that the best of the enemy forces could be stopped cold and destroyed in their own sanctuaries.
Was there a cover-up of what happened?
In essence, yes. I sat there in a press conference where a brigadier general briefed on this battle and said there were light to moderate casualties and the Americans won. And I stood up in the back row and I said, General, that's bullshit and you know it.
Obviously the truth was not told, what happened at Albany. And for some reason, the headquarters down in Saigon did not want that truth put out, obviously.
Even the survivors were expected to join in the charade. Thanksgiving came just 8 days after their battle. General William Westmoreland, Supreme Commander of the American forces in Vietnam, came with it.
I want to congratulate you on your distinguished victory. You men of the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, have distinguished yourselves.
General Westmoreland saluted us,
You fought bravely.
and he stepped down from his stump and strode off with his entourage behind him, and we all sort of went back to our turkey and wondered if he had any idea of what we had just been through.
No longer could the communists hope to win the war on the battlefield.
Officially, Albany was not only a victory, it was a victory grand enough to justify a war.
Drang had proved beyond question the soundness of the air-mobile approach to ground warfare.
And they looked at that body count in Saigon and said, this is the way to fight this war. This body count is satisfactory. We will embark on a war of attrition.
There's some voice that tells me you can almost date the rot at the heart of the American effort in Vietnam to that week.
Ironically, the battlefield at Landing Zone Albany taught the North Vietnamese a powerful lesson too. But they learned something very different from the U.S. military leaders.
We learned the Americans' weaknesses, and we're convinced that we could defeat them. The point, though, is the price in casualties that each side was prepared to pay to win the war. We were willing to pay a very high price.
Watch that hole.
Today, the men who fought in the Ya Drang Valley believe they alone can really understand what happened here, and they alone can find a way to bury the past. And so, 28 years after it all happened, they form a new circle on the battlefield, a closer one that honors those who fell on both sides.
Once again, we're back with our dear brothers. God rest their souls.
Well, I'd like to say for the 8 companies, 2nd of the 7th, and the men of the 2nd of the 7th who fought here and did a good job, you gentlemen who weren't here can be proud of them. They died a dirty death, but they fought like hell, and I'm proud of them.
And all my friends in Charlie Company and the column who died, our thoughts are with you. You are always in our thoughts, my friend. We love you still.
Rest in peace, gentlemen.
Amen.
Amen.
Coming to this place was hard, to honor the dead and make peace with old enemies. Leaving is harder still. But now the circle is complete, the mission at last fulfilled.
This is a sacred spot to me. So many men died here. And one way or another, I was going to get back here with my men. It's a sad feeling, but it's a great feeling. I can close it out now.
Every year, these men come to another sacred place. And this year, after the return to the battlefield, the visit is the most special of all.
The battle at the Drang Valley was one of the most savage and vicious battles this country has ever seen. And I'm proud that I served there. And I'm proud of all my buddies that didn't make it home. And I will live by that always.
I see 305 names of young Americans. God knows what they could have contributed to our country. National treasures, national tragedy. Whether they were draftees or young lieutenants out of Yale, wherever they came from, they were the best of us.
None of the men you've met tonight who fought in the Battle of the Ya Drang Valley is still in the military. Bill Beck is now a commercial artist in his hometown of Steelton, Pennsylvania. He's working on a painting depicting the battle, and he and Russell Adams are still best friends. Bruce Crandall flew 756 more helicopter missions. He was shot down in 1968 and broke his back. Today he's fully recovered and living in Mesa, Arizona. Dennis Deal is a financial officer with the U.S. Postal Service in Oklahoma City. Ernie Savage is a civilian evaluator of Army Reserve training at Fort Benning, Georgia. After 21 years in the Army, George Forrest retired with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. He's now a vocational training coordinator in Leonardstown, Maryland. Of the original 146 men in Larry Gwynn's company, only 15 were still in Vietnam a year after the battle. Gwynn was one of them. He's now a writer in Boston. Jack Smith is an ABC News correspondent in Washington, reporting for This Week with David Brinkley. Hal Moore retired from the Army in 1977 as a 3-star general. Today he lives in Auburn, Alabama. Joe Galloway covered other wars before becoming a senior writer for U.S. News and World Report. Together, Moore and Galloway wrote a critically acclaimed book about the Battle of the Drang Valley called We Were Soldiers Once and Young. And that's our broadcast for tonight. I'm Forrest Sawyer. Good night.
If you wish a transcript, please send $7 to Journal Graphics, 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado. To order a video cassette version of this program, use Visa or MasterCard. Call 1-800-913-3434.